it's Dr. Jen. I'm really excited for this episode today because we have actual two guests here to talk about a really cool device that I've actually been wearing called the Apollo Neuro. So let me introduce our guests. First guest is Dr. Dave Rabin. He is a neuroscientist, a double board certified psychiatrist, health tech entrepreneur, and inventor who's been studying the impact of chronic stress in humans for 15 years. He's the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Apollo Neuroscience, which has developed the first scientifically validated wearable technology that improves sleep, relaxation, focus, and calm using a novel touch therapy that signals safety to the brain. Dr. Rabin is the executive director of the Board of Medicine and the medical director of Apollo Clinic. In addition to focusing on integrative therapy, plant and natural medicines, couples therapy, and medicine-assisted psychotherapy, Dr. Rabin specializes in treatment-resistant mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychosomatic disorders, personality disorders, chronic pain disorders, insomnia, and substance use disorders using minimal and non-invasive treatment strategies. Dr. Rabin has also been fascinated by consciousness and our inherent ability to heal ourselves from injury and illnesses. And his clinical research focuses on non-invasive therapies for patients with treatment-resistant illnesses. Catherine Fantuzzi is an award-winning entrepreneur, and she's the co-founder and CEO of Apollo Neuro, and she was on a mission to change lives. Catherine is a CEO, a speaker, and a thought leader in the convergence of health tech and data. Catherine has led world-class teams and multi-million-dollar projects to deliver breakthrough tech commercializations for energy research and development authority in New York. She's now the CEO and co-founder of Apollo Neuroscience, a new technology that improves sleep, focus, and mood through your body's natural response to the soothing touch. And in a few years, Catherine transformed Apollo Neuro from an idea in a university lab into a powerful tool that has already helped tens of thousands of people. She was born and raised in New York and holds a BA from Smith College and a Master of Public Administration in Behavioral Economics and Finance from the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy. Welcome, both of my guests, Dr. Dave and Catherine. Welcome to the Integrative Health Podcast.
Thank you so much for having us, Dr. Jen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Awesome, great. Well, let's start out with Catherine for now. And I really want to dive into how did this even start? How did your passion align with this tech and this purpose?
That's a good question. Thank you. So this started as research at the University of Pittsburgh, joint research between the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. David, as you described, is a MD, PhD, he's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. And what we were intending to develop was actually a closed loop, an AI system to predict and respond to panic attack. So we're intended to use all this biometric data, all this wearable data that surrounds us to be actually able to identify when someone was having a moment of acute stress and to be able to respond to it. And that's in part because David, as you mentioned, has been studying chronic stress response for over 15 years and was working predominantly with patients with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of veterans with post-traumatic stress. And when we were looking at the response part, identifying that there's stress is actually fairly simple, right? Identifying that someone's heart rate's going up, they're not moving around, they're starting to sweat. You can identify stress in the body pretty easily, but how do you actually respond to it? And so David, at the time when we were working in the lab, got trained in MDMA therapy, which you may have heard of. It's in phase 3 trials with the FDA for PTSD. And it has had tremendous effect where people are, in fact, getting better after intervention, which is not usually what happens. We usually see people regress. And Dave's a mechanistic researcher, meaning he wants to know how stuff works. And so subsequently, Dave has done studies on the mechanism of MDMA, but the way it works is through safety, right? And by inducing states of safety in the body. Well, how else do you induce states of safety in the body? We know we can do it with soothing music. We know when you walk into a room with soothing light versus like glaring fluorescent light, you walked in someplace with nice calm lighting, you feel better. What is another one? Touch. And what's something you can take with you everywhere you go? Touch. And so David was taking a look at how to induce states of safety in the body without drugs, right? How do you do it naturally? And he mapped out the entire touch receptor system in the body, basically, to figure out what is our fastest pathway to safety. And as mammals, all mammals, so this isn't unique to humans, any mammal that I know of, when you give birth, the first thing that the baby does is have skin on skin or fur on fur contact with the mother. And that is our fastest path to safety. And so we mapped out the meditation literature, we looked at the breathwork literature, we looked at the exercise physiology literature, and we noticed something really in particular, which is that the heart and the lungs resonate at a certain pattern when you deep breathe. And it was consistent across all of it. And so Dave's idea was, well, could we get the body to act like it's meditating by delivering the frequency it creates when it's meditating? And the too long didn't read on that is yes. So Dave created these waveforms. And the way I ended up in the mix is David and I were engaged at the time. We're married now. David came home because about 2 years into this research, the University of Pittsburgh's innovation arm, which is essentially like a Y Combinator, if you follow startups, like a Y Combinator, early stage funding for prototyping and early commercialization, came to his lab and said, we want you to participate in these, helping to early stage bring this to market to test if this technology will work. And David's a scientist. So he comes home to me because my background is literally, I'm a professional neurotranslator. My job is how to get things out of a lab faster, because on average, it takes 17 years for something to go from bench to bedside in the United States, which is way too long. And so Dave came home to me and I said, yeah, sure, I'll come to this meeting and see what this is about. And the rest is history. I joined the university team to help the team in the lab patent their technology, to figure out how to prototype, how to test in the real world. And when I saw that the results that they were getting, David ran his first trial was a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled crossover trial, which is a long way of saying the most rigorous trial you can do in academic medicine to identify, would this technology, this new technology that we had developed, which wasn't even called Apollo at the time, would it be better than placebo and better than a control? And what we found is we gave this healthy population this task that you have to listen to single-digit numbers every 2 seconds for 3 minutes and add the last 2 you heard. So if you think about that, it's like a robot in your ear saying 2, 7, 5, 6, and you have to remember the last two numbers you heard. This is very stress-inducing. They give it to astronauts before they go into space to determine their tolerance for futility, because they don't want them to rip the bathroom door off if the codes don't work. And it really creates that, I'm sweating it. I can't remember the last number. I'm running out of time at a standardized test. I have to pee and I can't find a parking spot. Like, we all know what that feels like. And what we found is these 2 Apollo frequencies actually helped bring resting heart rate down, improve heart rate variability, and improve people's accuracy up to 25% on this task. And so when I saw these results and subsequent trials on meditation and exercise, improving people's ability to like maintain athletic performance, I was like, this is incredible, guys. We need to get this out of the lab. And so that's when I founded the company and started raising money and launching this product out in the real world.
That is so exciting. And the fact, like you said, you got it out quickly, because there are a lot of really cool things out there, but you have to jump through all these hoops to get to the technology out there. And so the listeners know, a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, it's the granddaddy of all testing. That's what you want. And it's hard to get funding for things that aren't pharmaceuticals. So I'm actually very impressed that you got all of these studies completed, because it's hard to get funding unless you're backed, by big pharmaceuticals. And let's switch to Dr. Dave. I love that, you're MD and PhD. So for those listening, that's a heck of a lot of work. And you are passionate about finding a solution to these chronically ill people. So, and you were probably finding out that pharmaceuticals weren't doing the trick.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're working with people who have PTSD or depression or anxiety disorders that have, are diagnosed and you're working in the traditional clinical setting, I think what myself and most of my colleagues found was that, only about 50% of people respond to our best treatments. So it means that 50% of people are being treated adequately, but 50% are not. And sometimes in the case of PTSD, it's even higher than 50% are not, or more than 50% are not responding long-term to the best treatments we have, like Prozac and Zoloft and psychotherapy, because they don't tackle the core problem. They're not really getting to the root of the illness. And I think what really drove us to search for better solutions was not only my research background, which kind of, helped me to ask deeper questions, but also the fact that we were seeing these patterns in the clinic and seeing that a lot of our patients weren't getting better long-term, even though we were using the best recommended treatments available. And, it really forced us to ask, what else is out there? And, what are people doing on their own that is helping them? And is there anything in common between the breath work and the meditation and the yoga and the mindfulness techniques and soothing touch and soothing music and MDMA assisted therapies, or anything that links all these together? And what it ultimately came down to was safety. And that these folks we were working with, whether they had depression or PTSD or anxiety disorders, they always felt afraid. And one of the only times they didn't feel afraid was when they were in the office with us, when they were getting hugs from their loved ones, when they were at home in their, comfy environment, that was soothing and peaceful. But for the most part, they just felt afraid all the time. And that was measurable. And so we thought, well, if we're able to measure their bodies and see that, hey, their bodies are saying, I feel like I'm under threat all the time, then maybe just improving their sense of safety would be enough to start to kick off the healing process in a positive direction. And it did, which was really exciting.
Let's talk more about that if we can, the actual chronic stress response and what that means long-term, because I have a lot of patients that they don't sleep well. And I talk to them about their trauma. I always ask what kind of trauma happened. And this could be something that we remember, and it could also be trauma that we don't remember. And PTSD for vets, like you said, this is that's who you've worked with. And that is really big. I have some patients that they have that, and it's really hard for them to find relief. But this could also just be things, your parents got divorced when you were younger and you don't feel safe. And what I see a lot, this really affects sleep. And I use the analogy of our bodies, like if you have to make a flight the next morning and you don't sleep as well, you're in like this light sleep. Imagine being like that every night. And that's what these patients with this chronic stress response, this is what they are going through. So could you go into a little bit more detail about the chronic stress response?
Sure. You want me to take that first, Catherine?
Go for it.
So I think that the short answer is that we only have so many resources to go around in our bodies. And this isn't really taught that well. At least I didn't feel like this was taught very well to me when I was in medical school. I don't know about you, Dr. Jen, but I felt that we learned about the autonomic nervous system, which is split into two halves. There's the sympathetic nervous system, which is what we call the fight or flight response system, which is supposed to kick in when we're under threat of survival, like lack of food, lack of air, lack of water, lack of shelter, predators chasing after us, things that might end our lives relatively quickly are supposed to turn on that fight or flight response. And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which we often call our rest and digest nervous system, or the recovery nervous system, or the vagal nervous system, which is responsible for bringing the body into a recovery state. And that's activated by safety. And there's only so much blood and resources to go around to both systems. So we can't fully feed both systems at any time. And what happens is when we're under threat, and we don't want to, right? Because when we're under threat, for example, if there's a lion chasing us in the jungle going back, a couple, 10 million years or something like that, if there's an animal, a predator chasing us in the jungle, we absolutely want all of our resources like blood going to our skeletal muscles, our heart and our lungs and our motor cortex of our brain and our fear center to get us out of there to safety. And we don't want to be thinking about digestion and reproduction when we're running from a lion, because that would potentially lead us to certain death and not able to continue our line. So the body has highly evolved these pathways that make sure that when we're actually in a survival threat, that all the resources go there and make sure to get us to safety. But when we're not under threat, we want those resources to go back to our rest and recovery parasympathetic system. And that includes reproduction, digestion, immunity, metabolism, and as you mentioned, sleep and rest. And the problem is when our body perceives that we're under threat, even if it's from something like not a lion, but in modern day, too many emails, too many responsibilities, too much news, right? Anything that overstimulates us, too many screens, right? That sends a signal to our brains that we are potentially under threat, and that takes resources away from our rest and recovery system and all of our recovery organ systems. And so, but those organ systems are still being asked to work, right? We're still being asked to sleep before our tests and our flights. We're still being asked to digest our food and absorb it. We're still being asked to reproduce and to fight off illness. And so those systems are still being run at full force or near full force, but they're not getting the nutrients they need from the blood. They're not getting the waste clearance from the blood. And so what happens is over time, they end up getting nutrient depleted, and they end up building up more toxins in the organ systems and the cells because they're not getting as much waste clearance. So if you can imagine, it's like imagine having, not being able to go to the store and not being able to have garbage pickup for weeks on end, right? It's not a good look. And so that's what's happening inside our body's organ systems when we are constantly under threat, or perceiving that we are under threat when we're not getting enough sleep and we're not able to recover. And it's just it's a resource depletion issue. And so this helps us. So by understanding this, it really helps to remind ourselves that we can actually train our bodies to remember that we're not under threat most of the time anymore. Thank goodness we're not under survival threat. And if we can remind ourselves by doing the techniques like the soothing touch, the soothing music, the breath work, the meditation, the yoga, the exercise, things like that in a healthy way, it helps to remind us that we are actually safe and that we can still function at a high level, but still allow our recovery system to get resources. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, just running errands, the to-do list. I see a lot of women in their 30s to 50s, and these ladies are stressed. They have adrenal problems, thyroid problems from the adrenal problems. And it goes back to they're just living in this fight or flight response. And it's not good. It's not healthy. And I'll share a little bit about myself. My heart rate variability. I saw Dr. Dave. Do you have an Oura ring too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on your pinky. Yeah, that my husband, same. Like he can only wear it on his pinky. You must have big hands. So yeah, all my metrics are amazing on my Oura ring, except my heart rate variability. It's in the teens, sometimes low. It's embarrassing. I was embarrassed. So I tried cold therapy. I thought that would bring it up. Okay. Did that all winter. And it actually really did help. I think it really reset things. I felt great. Did nothing for my heart rate variability. So then I just started wearing the Apollo Neuro. Usually recovery is my favorite mode on that. And we'll go into the modes and stuff a little bit later. And when I wear it consistently, when I'm good and I wear it consistently, my heart rate variability goes up. And that's the only thing that, yeah, Catherine is giving the thumbs up. It's the only thing that I've been really able to help with that. And so I'm like, I know this works. And my trauma, now I didn't wear an Oura ring before residency, but mine's probably residency, the stuff I saw, the things I went through. And for me, I don't have time to do EMDR right now or all of these long therapies during the day. So this is really helpful. It's been great. So let's talk about the research a little bit, if you don't mind, Catherine or Dr. Dave. And I love that you guys are married. I just love that. So you guys get along still, even though you work together and are married?
Yeah, I really wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, Dave and I are both like full on people. So if we didn't work together, we'd never see one another. So
yes, I have a friend that does that. Her and her husband are both workaholics. So, and it works for them. So we're
just both really motivated. There's a lot of good to do in the world and a lot of opportunity on that front. So Dave and I are pretty aligned.
Catherine, do you mind if I add one thing real quick?
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to Dr. Jen, because you brought up residency medical training trauma, while Apollo and the way we discovered it came out of working with people with PTSD, some of whom were veterans and many of whom were not veterans, they were all people who had just experienced hardship that did not receive adequate support afterwards. And when one of the major discoveries that we talk about was when we brought our original Apollo prototypes to the ER at the hospital, and we started giving them to all of our colleagues in the ER. We were working behind, in the back room and using it for recovery in between seeing patients on ourselves. And I think we realized, at least for me and my heart, I realized very quickly that this is not just for patients. This could be a tool that all of us can benefit from, because most of us didn't have any kind of diagnosis, but just having that little boost of recovery and that little boost of safety to us, even when we're just have 10 minutes in between one intense client to another, really dramatically impacted our quality of the way we delivered quality of care to our clients and the way we felt. And that really steered us to making Apollo a consumer product that could be available to everyone, not just for patients leaving the office on their day-to-day, but also for anybody else who's struggling to overcome chronic stress.
Yeah, I love that. This should be something that everyone should have, because some people believe that everyone has trauma. I was talking to this one practitioner and I'm like, oh, I put on my intake form, do you have a trauma? Was there a traumatic event? And some people argue you should just assume everyone has trauma, but sometimes people don't realize that. They don't think that this event that happened to them is traumatic at all. So then they just push it back, and it's affecting your body. It's affecting your sleep, your adrenals, all of that. It's very hard to let people know that we really have to address that chronic level of the stress response that is in our society, especially, I'm sure, post-COVID, you've seen this multiplied. I mean, everyone has a little bit of post-traumatic stress from what we've been through, because I've seen it in my office.
For sure.
Oh yeah, and I mean, even to your earlier point about you yourself and your patients, even healthy people, like when you're talking about the stress response that Dave's talking about, like you're having basically your fight or flight response is incredibly important. It's something that's there to protect you, right? Like if there was a car and you're driving and someone cuts you off in traffic, that is entirely important to save you, right? And you need that response to be good and quick to keep you safe, right? That's why it's there. But when we're overstimulated, which you do not have to be diagnosed with something, almost everyone I know is overstimulated, right? The amount of information that we get in the first 30 minutes of being awake is as much information as someone got in a week in the 1950s. Like we cannot, while humans are the most amazing adapters, like there's no way that we could have come up with a way to adapt to everything that's changed in our environment since the Industrial Revolution. It's insane, right? And so when you think about that daily life, chronic stress is a real bear, because not only does it make your heart rate higher and your heart rate variability worse, but it also makes it harder to recover, because it's harder to sleep when you're overstimulated and overtired, and it's harder to focus, and it's harder to meditate, and it's harder to actually remember to do the things you're supposed to do. This is why it takes a lot of motivation to exercise when you already don't feel good, right? If you're already really stressed out, remembering to go take a walk for your mental health isn't always the thing that you do. Sometimes you watch Netflix and eat ice cream, right? Like it's because your body, and that's not your fault, right? That's your body looking for a dopamine hit to basically relieve the strain. But that vicious cycle of being stressed out and then not sleeping and then not sleeping, so you're more stressed out, is part of the reason that it is the main motivation of why we developed Apollo. Because what Apollo is doing is it's something that you're wearing on your body that's sending that signal of safety to your body, as if you were walking around hugging your best friend, or you're with your cute puppy, or you're getting all these like hugs from people you love throughout the day, reestablishing that balance in your body. And so those waveforms, you described it, your recovery vibe or your social vibe or the sleep vibe, are intended to establish that state in the body. And they work in the same way that breath work or meditation does, but through your skin. And so the real opportunity is that you're getting the benefits of meditation and mindfulness practice while you're going about your day-to-day life. And so what we see is cyclically, just like you said, Dr. Jen, that when you use Apollo during the day, it makes it so it's easier to fall asleep at night. And then when you use it at night, you're getting deeper, more restorative sleep. And it's there to basically interrupt and redirect that cycle in a positive loop instead of a negative loop, right? Being more restorative and more calm leads to more restoration and more calm. And Dave likes to say this: practice makes perfect, right? If you practice being stressed out all the time, it's not inherent. Your body just remembers to do that, right? Like an inflammation response. And so if you practice safety, if you feel safety, your body starts to remember safety and start responding that way. And one of the outcomes is improvement in heart rate variability, which is this key metric of your body's resilience to strain, so that when someone cuts you off in traffic or something that really requires you to respond happens, you're in a state to be able to do that because you're not overtired and you can think, right? And you have clarity and control. And that's really what we want to give people back, is more agency and control over how they feel, right?
Yeah. And I love how you said we're overstimulated, and we are. It's constant. And even like Reels is an example of that, scrolling through Reels and people are getting that dopamine hit. And this is it's not good for you. So yeah, that's what I like about the Apollo, because you can just wear it. I've had my 10-year-old wear it a few times, and I'm probably going to get him one to wear at school, just because they're overstimulated at school. There's so much overstimulation. So your body is just on this high alert. And what can we do about it? We have to work jobs. We have to run our kids to activities. I mean, I have 4 children. So even though I've kind of cut down on activities and things, it's like a rat race. I'll have to tell you guys something funny. My husband texts me, and he's like, while we were talking, he said, I want to read you the text. M's tooth just went through his lip. So this is my 3-year-old, and then he sends me pictures. So I'm going to have to suture him or glue him after the recording. But I thought we were like going stable and smooth, because he was going to drop the 2 boys off their baseball and I was going to meet them out there. And then now we have to suture a lip, right? Now, here's the thing, like, I'm super calm about that because I'm an ER doctor, but at the same time, I know from my heart rate variability that my nervous system, it needs work, right? So that's why I think these metrics are really important, especially with women like me. I see in my practice, like, mainly women see me in my integrative practice, and it's because women just are hormones, because we have that monthly surge of hormones. So if we're not paying attention to our cycle, that stress response, if we're not really, like Catherine was saying, if we just don't relax when we're supposed to and we push through, that's going to increase our stress response, especially that week before your period. So yeah, I see a lot of women, because I feel like we also ignore things and push through. But men too, I will say that something like this, I think, would be good for them, because they also are very poker face when it comes to their health, and they try to hide things. And I guess, Dr. Dave, I'd like you to touch on this, like with your veterans, they're probably just tough it out until when it's too late, right? I mean, I just, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, I think it's not just veterans, even you and I were taught, and Catherine, I know in your life, right? We're all taught to just kind of suck it up and to not acknowledge that we are under strain, and to not acknowledge that we're really overwhelmed and stressed, because taking a break we were taught that it's like self-indulgent, right? That we just need to keep going. And it seems like everybody else keeps going. But I think, and ultimately we have to always remember that, and even the military is switching on this. And I think a lot of medical training programs are converting on this to eliminate the suck it up approach, because it's not working and it's making a lot of people really sick. Just to give you an idea, we've had probably higher rates of veteran suicide in the last 5 years than ever before. We've had higher rates of physician suicide in the last 5 years than ever before, especially since COVID. And it's tragic because, when you think about the role, what a veteran really represents and what a physician represents, these are 2 of the most highly trained types of people. Obviously, they're different types of people, but they're 2 of the most highly trained types of people in the entire group of humans that we have. And they are not able to cope with the amount of stress and burden that we're facing right now. And And so making sure that we always remember and that we support each other in that, in remembering that we absolutely cannot sustain peak performance without prioritizing peak recovery. It's like the idea of burning the candle at both ends. Like what happens? You're left with no fuel, right? You're left with no wax. And so you have to balance these things.
That's a great point. And you can't do leg day 2 days in a row. We have to rest our muscles. So we don't rest. Yeah, you're right. Like the go, go, go mentality. And even, I'm a Christian, and bringing this into Sunday resting, I really need to make it a priority to actually follow the Bible and leave time for rest. And that's not my personality. It's go, 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 go. We were supposed to rest.
Yeah, you need to rest. And it's not just veterans and healthcare and, first responders and healthcare workers, like shift workers, right? There's a lot of strain, but it's everyone. 77% of Americans say their stress impacts their physical health. Just like, let that settle in. That's more than 3/4 of us. That's not normal. It shouldn't be normal, right? For us to be that way. And yes, rest is part of it, but there's also, just practices and tools to take care of yourself. And I like what you're pointing out, right? All of these faiths, Christianity, Judaism, all these faiths have a day of rest. And because we're supposed to respect ourselves, right? We're supposed to respect ourselves and take care of ourselves. And it's our responsibility to take care of ourselves. And we really, you bring up women a lot. I see this, 30% of Americans have insomnia. Women are twice as likely to be diagnosed. And it's because we take care of everyone. And so you got to take care of yourself so that you're able to be there to take care of everyone else, right? Because if you fall apart, then who's there?
Yes. And like you said about, you said 70 something people say they're stressed. Yeah. Well, I think that goes along with metabolic flexibility, and only, 20 some percent of Americans are metabolically flexible. And this is where we see the diabetes. If your stress is up, and I have to explain this to patients a lot when we're working on their insulin resistance, which means that they're on their way to diabetes. I'm like, we have to get your stress under control, because your stress goes up and your glucose goes up. And because they're like, I have these spikes and I don't know why. And I'm like, well, let's look at stress. What were you doing? And insulin resistance diabetes leads to, dementia, and, it's everything. We have to protect our body. And I think this starts with the basics of the parasympathetic and sympathetic system. And really, this has been glossed over, probably because you can't make a pharmaceutical for it. But it really is not a high priority. And I don't think you see a lot of psychiatrists talking about products like this, or even these kind of things. So let's go into the research a little bit. If you could talk about maybe some of the research studies that you have completed. And I know there's a lot more that you're currently doing also.
Sure thing. Yeah. It's exciting because Apollo came directly out of this scientific research on the stress response, and in healthy folks and in folks who had diagnoses of PTSD and traumatic brain injury and other illnesses. And I think in the first studies that we've done, the first two in particular were on healthy subjects, which is the way you're supposed to start clinical trials. And because there's a lot of bias in the diagnosed populations when you first start out. And so we did our first trials with healthy subjects at the University of Pittsburgh in these double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled crossover settings where the same folks experience all the different conditions. And then you measure while they're wired up to EEG brainwave measurement and EKG heart rate and heart rate rhythm measurement and sweat measurements and pupil measurements and physical movement measurements. And we're assessing their subjective, how do you feel? How do you feel when we ask you measurements, and then also their cognitive performance on tasks, all at the same time in tandem. And this is what is pretty much the gold standard for what we call a cognitive neuroscience laboratory assessment. And it was really exciting because I think it's safe to say when we do this kind of work, I would say 95 to 99% of these studies do not come out positive. So I don't think we really expected to see anything statistically significant. But what we actually found was that when we put healthy subjects into this experimental protocol that Catherine mentioned earlier, where we gave them a cognitive stressor task that is a task that NASA gives to astronauts before they go into space to test their ability to respond, to perform relatively simple tasks under extremely stressful conditions, we saw that cognitive performance or accuracy went up by up to 25% within just 3 minutes, only with the Apollo vibrations, not with the placebo, not with the no vibration condition. And there were multiple placebos in this study. And nobody, because they were double blind and randomized, neither the researchers nor the subjects knew what they were getting. So everyone was blinded. And we saw that cognitive performance went up by up to 25%, and that it was directly proportionate to the amount of improvement in heart rate variability. So what that means is that which is consistent with meditation and mindfulness literature, as you calm the body, people perform better cognitively because they're calmer. And so they can focus better because they're not as stressed out. So that was really interesting. And that was really the first key that showed us, hey, there is actually something here. And at this point, there had been nothing ever described that improved heart rate variability without effort. So this was the first time that we'd ever really figured out anything like that. And the first paper that was actually published recently was a paper describing the same kind of experience, but for collegiate athletes at the University of Pittsburgh, showing that in that 2-minute period after intense physical exercise, that applying Apollo on the recovery vibes that you were describing that you like earlier reliably and statistically significantly improved HRV within just 2 minutes. And so that was, again, confirmation that whether you're in a mental, cognitive stressful situation or a physical exercise-related situation, that just by delivering soothing sensation to the skin, in the case of Apollo vibrations, that you can reliably improve heart rate variability and therefore calm the body and clear somebody's mind to be able to function better. And that correlates with improved performance cognitively and physically after, which is really exciting. And then we've shown subsequently from the use of Apollo in the real world that we've seen this persist over time. So it's not just a short-term benefit, it actually is a benefit that improves month over month as people consistently use Apollo, to the point where people are getting roughly 11% average improvements in heart rate variability, 4% reduction in resting heart rate, 19% improvement in deep sleep, 14% improvement in REM, and 30 minutes more sleep at night just by using Apollo consistently over 3 months. And to give you an idea of how meaningful that is comparable to the kinds of benefits we see when people adopt a new 30-minute exercise routine for the same duration, 3 months, or a new yoga routine or a new meditation routine. And the reason why that's so exciting is because the theory was that Apollo is tapping into the same pathway through touch, and in fact, it's getting the same results. And so it seems very much like it is tapping into that exact same pathway, and that we're able to give people a lot of the same benefits. And we have 14 more clinical trials that are ongoing, with several more that will likely be published in between 2023 and 24, showing similar outcomes for folks with conditions, diagnosed conditions, and those without, which is really exciting.
And I think that was the most important thing for me, was when we showed that it was working in the lab, I wanted to see that this was also working in the real world, because the question was, okay, but do people get used to it? Do they need more and more of it? And what we did, that study that Dave's alluding to, we tracked 1,500 people over the course of 2 years. And we saw that people who used Apollo consistently, so they used about an hour and a half during the day for relaxation or for improved focus, and they used vibes at night for sleep, got 25 to 30 more minutes of sleep a night, right? It's huge, right? And that they were seeing durable improvements to their heart rate variability and their cardiovascular metrics, because using Apollo and reintroducing that state of safety was actually helping to retrain their nervous system to help them be calmer and more resilient to stress, right? So they were rebuilding themselves through their sense of touch. And for me, that's the most important thing, right? It'll work in the moment, but if you use this thing consistently, you're actually going to help improve your sleep and improve your focus and your overall sense of well-being and your mood by just helping to improve that regulation of your nervous system.
Yeah, this is such a big deal. It's such a big part of our health, that parasympathetic and sympathetic balance. And it's so cool that just wearing this on your wrist. I wear mine on my wrist. It looks like an, an iWatch or whatever you call it, because I don't wear, EMFs except, yeah. So, oh, Catherine, why don't you show
I
everyone?
have it on my chest too.
I
Yeah.
was wondering, I'm like, is that the Apollo or is that like a hospital badge?
No, it's the Apollo. So you can wear it on your wrist. I wear it on the clip and attach it to my shirt or to my bra and wear it on my chest during the day. And then I wear it on my ankle for sleep at night because I really am just kind of funny about having things on my wrist. So we make a joke that we have team wrist, team ankle, and now there's team clip.
Yes. Yeah. So you have all these different options on where to wear it. So I guess, could you guys either, Dr. Dave or Catherine, talk about the different vibrations and the intensities and how that matters?
Sure. So basically, the vibes work this way. There are vibes for energy and socializing and focusing, and then vibes for recover, relaxation, sleep. And they essentially are the most energizing to the most relaxing. So energy is kind of like a little bit of espresso. Social is what I'm on right now. I use it for, Zoomageddon and meetings and conferences and when I have to present. I'll use focus for like butt in the chair work, right? Which is one of the ones we used in our cognitive performance trial. And then I'll use the relaxing ones at night. And basically they work like music. If you think about Apollo, it's almost like a playlist for your body. It helps your body transition into that state, and then it helps to sustain the state that you want to be in. And then the reason you can wear it in multiple locations, like you can wear it on your wrist or your ankle or on your chest, for example, is because it works through our sense of touch. So as long as you can feel it, right, it doesn't have to be skin on skin, it could be through clothes. As long as you can feel it, it's working. And the intensity that you mentioned is that more is not more. Right? You don't turn your music up to full blast when you want to focus, right? So you just send the intensity or the volume really to right where you can notice it, but then almost like white noise, it fades into the background and you don't notice it after a minute or two. And that's what we call the sensory threshold, which is really just where you notice it and then it fades into the background, and that's the right intensity. And I really like it on my chest personally. I love that location, and I like it on the ankle when I sleep.
I'll have to try that out on the chest. I don't know. I just had it on my wrist and went for it. But I really like picking
whatever's working for you. If you like it there, great. I like it on the chest the best, but we have all sorts of people wearing it at all sorts of different places. So whatever works best for you is the way to use it.
And it is really cool. I remember I took it with me. I had a conference I was speaking at, and I think I put it on calm before I was speaking, but I'll have to try social for speaking. I do like that. But I remember I did wear it for social when I was talking, after. And then, so I wore my Apollo, up on the podium with like my dress and everything. I'm like, I want people to wonder what it is and ask questions. Mm-hmm. And then on the way home, driving home, I put it on the alert, for a little burst of energy instead of coffee, because I don't drink coffee. So it really does work. So you have to try it. People might be like, oh, it's just, what is this? Does it even make sense? And it does, because the touch is so important. Like Catherine was saying, like getting hugs all the time. So did you do any studies with actual like neurotransmitters with the Apollo yet?
So those studies are very, very expensive to do, like in the multiple hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. And so those are not generally the studies of first choice, because they don't actually show benefit clinically. They really they look at mechanism and how things work, which are exciting, but they're not the most meaningful to our patients or to the community. It's more for like our own intellectual curiosity. So we have those studies going on now, some of which are NIH funded, going on at the University of Pittsburgh, looking at actually what changes in the brain. And then we have other studies at the Denver VA that are looking at the whole inflammatory cascade around PTSD and what changes all the way down to our DNA expression of stress response genes, which is really exciting. But those should be wrapping up probably in the end of this year or in 24.
That is so exciting. Yeah, that's for the inner nerd in me. You know, like how does this affect hormones and neurotransmitters? It's not necessary for the actual product, how it works, like you were saying. But that's great. You got NIH funding. You guys have been really busy.
Yeah, that's how our initial studies were funded as well. It was through NIH funding, NIH funded grants through the University of Pittsburgh. That's how we got our initial trials completed, which was really exciting. And to your point about the way you use the device, that's exactly how you're supposed to use it. It's supposed to be using it to help your body calm and balance the nervous system, but it's also balancing the circadian rhythm, because you can use energy and focus and social instead of caffeine. And you can use the relaxation and sleep instead of other substances like alcohol that people use to relax at the end of the day, because 80% of people who drink coffee also drink alcohol at night to unwind. And so we're all on the Elvis diet and it's all bad for our sleep. So if we can supplement with something natural like touch and music to help energize the body and relax the body without substances, you help to maintain your normal circadian balance and get your recovery up, which is what we all need, because the chaos of the world isn't going away. The only thing we can control is how we respond to it.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think, what's so well said is that, modern day life, and what we're talking about, modern day life really disrupts our own natural rhythm, right? Like when we are feeling our best is when our rhythm is aligned with nature, and nature has a certain rhythm. It has monthly cycles with the moon, and it has daily cycles with the sun. And as the sun sets, right, we know our melatonin is supposed to go up, and then we're supposed to wind down for sleep. And then our cortisol is supposed to increase right before we wake up, and our melatonin is supposed to go down. And when we're overstimulated, that entire connection to our natural rhythm gets disrupted. And what we see, especially in mental health and in psychiatry, is when we track these rhythms with our patients, that sleep, good quality, restful sleep, is at the foundation of maintaining balance in our bodies and maintaining these natural rhythms. And that has probably the single biggest impact on recovery and health and on HRV, right? So if our rhythms are messed up, whether it's by force through being training in the military or training in the hospital system, medical system, or shift work, or whether it's just because we have to take care of kids at home and we're overwhelmed, or any number of other things, that those rhythms being messed up over the long term actually makes us much more likely to get sick and underperform, and feel not so good a lot of the time and have low energy. And so whatever we can do to help nudge the body back into those natural rhythms, be that soothing music or tools like Apollo or breath work or meditation or any of these things, is all going to be promoting of health. And I think the message that we're really trying to send to people is Apollo is a great tool to start if you've never learned any of these techniques, because I don't know about you, Dr. Jen, but like Catherine and I don't think learned any of this stuff growing up. I know I didn't, and I never learned how to breathe properly or meditate or anything like that. And so, it required a lot of training as an adult. But, when we didn't learn that stuff, anything that we can do with the music, the touch, Apollo, and things like that help restore our rhythm is going to result in improved health. And that's the single first place to start. And it all centers around good sleep.
Yeah, it really does. And I think, listeners out there, we live in such a toxic world. And I talk about this a lot on social media. So anything we could do to help bring our body into balance and help our body out, because it's not our grandparents, not to say they had it easy, they had it different. And we really have to use these technologies that we have available. And they're fun. I love biohacking. I would consider this a biohacking device. And or just an essential device for me now.
I think biohackers are people, in my opinion, that are really just people who are really focused on improving their well-being and their health. But we see everybody using this, right? I have everyone from kids using this for anxiety and stress and sleep, all the way up to older folks And so, that's been really remarkable for me, is to see how broad the populations are of the people that are using it. I've got little kids using it. I have fighter pilots using it, right? I've got moms using it, and I've got older people using it. It's just been really remarkable to see the impact. And it makes sense, because we're all humans, we're all mammals. We all respond to touch in the same way, and we all have, everybody needs to sleep, and everybody needs to get their work done during the day and feel calm doing it. And wouldn't it be nice if you felt calm and focused during the day instead of overwhelmed and stressed out? You get more done and you have a better time doing it.
I would love to see these in the nursing homes, right? It'd be so good to help with their sleep, because that's where a lot of the falls happen, is because they're getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, or they're on some sort of, sleep medication, which those are all awful, as we know. So maybe they could just, maybe a nursing home could start that, be like the first healthy nursing home that cares about their residents. But yeah, it really should be everywhere. And the schools, I think this would have such great utilization in schools.
We're starting there. We're in some integrative pediatric clinics. We have some schools that are looking at adopting Apollo for a way to, manage, because we are in a trial in Michigan State for ADHD in kids, and have had really good results, right? Because it improves cognitive performance and focus in healthy people. Why would it not for people who are neurodivergent, or who have different ways of paying attention, right?
It's amazing. So exciting.
Well, and just since you brought up the nursing home thing and the ADHD thing, I think, we are big fans of not over medicating people, because one of the biggest challenges we see in our practice of psychiatry is people come to us on so much medicine that we can't even tell what the original problem was anymore. And I'm sure you see this in the ER too, and you're like, oh, well, now what am I supposed to do? I can't taper all this person's medication in the ER when I don't have long-term care with them. And so, I think especially with kids and elderly adults, who are the most likely people to have side effects from medication, giving them any opportunity to access tools that could be soothing or relieving of symptoms like anxiety that don't require the prescription of a medication that could bring on additional side effects is incredibly valuable. And so we have done we're moving forward, as Catherine said, to get Apollo into use by kids in school who have attention issues. And that's a really exciting area. Also, because you can schedule Apollo and it has no screen. So you can literally set it to focus vibes when kids go to school, and then it will be on focus for the whole time they're in school and help them focus without any medication at all. And we have a lot of children who are able to use Apollo to accomplish their focus needs without going on medication, which is one of the most exciting things for us, because medicating children when it needs to happen, it needs to happen. But when it doesn't need to happen, it shouldn't happen. And that is a really important topic for us, especially in the mental health space. And then on the nursing home side, right, it's just the opposite end of the spectrum, but people who are still have a lot of trouble with medication. And we have, nursing homes can be very challenging places to integrate new tools, but there's a huge amount of potential here. And to give you an idea of how impactful this has been, we haven't had a chance to try this in the patients of nursing homes yet, but we're happy to do that. So if anybody is listening, is interested in making something like that happen, please reach out to us, because we know how impactful this could be. But we gave Apollos, when we had the chance, to nursing home staff, to the nurses themselves. And the nurses, after just 2 weeks, reported 40% less anxiety than they did 2 weeks before, from just adding Apollo to their lives, which is so exciting. And so they subjectively feel that they're able to provide better patient care when they're feeling less stressed. And so the more that we can help it's not just about one side or the other, the more that we can help everybody kind of settle down a little bit and feel more present and calm, then the better versions of ourselves we're going to be.
It is so exciting. What you guys are doing is so amazing. Dr. Dave and Catherine, you're a power couple and you're changing the world. So I would love to wrap up. Just any finishing thoughts you guys would want to talk about, and also importantly, where to purchase Apollo. I'm going to put all this in the show notes and link it, but I would love for you to share where they could follow Apollo Neuro and everything, please.
Sure. So you can find us at apolloneuro.com, and you spell Apollo APOLLONEURO.com, apolloneuroscience.com. You can also find us on wearablehugs.com. That'll redirect. And you can follow us on Instagram and all the other places at Apollo Neuro. And then also Dave is a wealth of information, posts a lot of information himself. Dave, what's your handle?
At Dr. David Rabin on Instagram and Twitter. Please do follow me and reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
And we just want to thank you so much for having us. It was a great conversation. And I'm really excited about the work that you do. And I see you in the corner, eat, sleep, move, breathe, all those things. So it's really just about getting back in touch with your body to give it the time it needs to recover and rest, so that it can all be at our best. So we're really happy that you're aligned on that mission. We need more docs like you.
Yes, and it's happening. There's a revolution. Yeah, it's happening. So thank you for what you're doing. It's so exciting. I think this is brilliant, and it's just going to change people's lives.
Awesome.
No,